future is, but it'll never be our past. Even just to turn your world, will never ever change the past. Yeah.
Hello everybody, it's Fight Club Hubs, and welcome to another wonderful episode of GVN Live. We took an extra week off, and it was probably a bad idea because we don't feel very well right now. So with me is Jan and Mr. Mark. How are you two doing today in that order?
Oh, it's a Tuesday. I guess it's okay.
At least it's not a Monday.
I think I would prefer a Monday to today right now.
I think I would be right up there with you. How about you, Mark?
I'm fine.
Slow down there, buddy. But anyway, so a lot of stuff happened the past couple of weeks. We had a slow news week leading up to what was supposed to be our episode last week. But the minute that came and went, like, the floodgates opened up and all kinds of things happened, including the fact that we had a last-second addition made to the show literally before we decided to go on air. So today we're going to be talking about, Microsoft is buying everybody. We're going to be talking a little bit about Nintendo successfully suing a ROM site, and that'll play into, Sony PlayStation Classic. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Blizzard going mobile. So to start things off, let's talk a little bit about the Nintendo suit. So Love ROMs got sued by Nintendo and their sister site, I think it was Love Retro, and they pled guilty. And Nintendo won that suit in the amount of, a small figure, like $12 million. Tiny amount, insignificant. I'm sure their ad revenue can pay that off easily. But, so the big dilemma now is, with Nintendo setting such a high precedent in regards to suing the pants off of people just for ROM hosting sites, are we really now that upset that, people like EMU Paradise decided, you know what, we see stuff going down, we're shutting down? Do you think in hindsight this might be a thing? More websites are probably in the scope of Nintendo and probably going to shut down before anything happens? What do you guys think?
I don't know. I think that emulation in general is not a foreign concept. A lot of people know what it is. It's only just recently become like a big deal because of this weird classic console kick that a lot of these companies have been on recently, to a point where it's like, oh, these are things that we can do that people want, because obviously they're going to these emulation sites and they're downloading these emulators and they're getting they're creating software versions of our BIOS code and all of this craziness. And Nintendo being Nintendo and just being who they are, let's be honest, they've been proprietary for ever, literally. And they're like, oh, hey, we're missing out on millions of dollars that we could be getting on letting these games be available for a flat rate versus individually rebuying these games through Virtual Console or on DS or on whatever new system they happen to have out at the time. That's their current generation. It's kind of ludicrous to think that these guys didn't have this in the back of their head, that this is something they needed to work on for I don't know how long. It's been a while. And now all of a sudden they're just like, not only is this all bad, but this is bad to a point where we don't want to lose more money. We're more interested in making sure that we have the ability to basically have our fans buy directly from us versus not get any money for a game that hasn't seen console breadth for 25 years. There's a lot of these games that are on this system that's like, which would you rather which would you rather actually pay real money for? Am I going to go out of my way to try to get my hands on a physical copy of something like, say, Chrono Trigger versus emulated? Or am I more worried about trying to make sure that I can get another $10 copy of 1942 for the NES? I mean, there's a lot of these games and a lot of choices that a lot of these companies are making on these systems that just don't make any feasible sense. But to put it mildly, $12 million to a web page that specifically tailors to the games that I'm pretty sure nobody either can find or is willing to pay $150 for anymore is really that interested in spending that kind of money to get it on a plastic hardware piece that only, again, is proprietary and only functions on that system. And you cannot add, you cannot remove, you cannot modify, because that takes some sort of degree for a lot of people to try to put these walkthroughs together to try to figure out how to get more content on this console that they already spent $60 on again.
Okay, so Mark, how do you feel about a lot of these websites host ROMs in terms of doing preservation? And Nintendo, of course, we all know, is extremely aggressive when it comes to protecting their IPs. They've been known to be very aggressive since the early 90s. What are your thoughts on this conflict of interest between these two? One for preservation, one of like history, and the other for image.
I mean, it's a difficult sort of situation to balance between, honestly. You're kind of in this awkward state where the people who are arguing in favor of gaming history are kind of doing so against the legality of the situation, whereas the people who are arguing for, the financial value of things are only really interested in the financial value of what can make money for them right now. And I kind of feel like Nintendo doing what they did here was basically sort of a way to send a message to ROM holders, to people who are hosting these sorts of sites, that they didn't particularly care about getting the money from the suit. They're kind of saying, hey, watch what you host, more or less. They're kind of sort of making it a public message of saying, watch what you're hosting on your service, watch what you're doing here, because we will defend our content. We will defend our copyrights. I do think there probably is a case where emulation sites can host stuff that still isn't readily available for archival purposes, stuff that you just can't get anywhere else. But I do think that a company like Nintendo or like Sony or like Sega or like whoever is going to be a lot more guarded about allowing stuff that is still current content for them to be hosted. I don't think Nintendo is going to come after anybody for stuff that is not a game that they own. Like, they're not going to go after anybody for games that belong to Konami or Capcom. And I definitely don't think anybody's going to be coming to sue you if you have up ROMs for games that publishers have no reasonable recourse to get back out into the world. Like, I don't think Sega's going to show up with a cease and desist if you're hosting the Amazing Spider-Man versus the Kingpin. I don't think that's going to happen, because like, they're never going to be able to publish that game again. They're never going to be able to publish that game again. We are never going to see that game again from an emulation perspective, because the amount of money that Sega would have to pay Disney to republish a game that nobody cares about, except for, diehard Spider-Man fans, it's not worth it to them. It's absolutely not worth it to them. So I think it's a matter of emulation sites can still exist, provided they are smarter about what they host. I think that there's a point where your desire for archival of digital media is viable and valid. But if you're trying to make the argument that, Super Mario Brothers is a game that you should do something with that now. We know Nintendo has that stored somewhere. We know they're not going to lose the source code for fucking Super Mario Brothers. If that's the argument you want to make, that's fine. You go ahead and do that. But if you're going to make the argument that, like the newest Phoenix Wright that comes out, I want to digitally archive that by not paying money for it and downloading it now so that it's saved to my... Get the fuck out of here. We know what you're doing. We know what you're fucking doing. So I think that digital archiving is good for games that are difficult or impossible to get otherwise, and I would absolutely defend that sort of thing. But I do think that a lot of people, hosting-wise in particular, need to be a little bit smarter about what it is they choose to host, because people are going to come after you if you host stuff that they are very likely to continue to be able to make money for.
So, looking at it like this, so yeah, Nintendo going to come after people, you host their properties on their website, like you have a Mario or Duck Hunt ROM on there, they're going to come after you. What is stopping Nintendo from, let's say, going after emulator programmers? People like RockNest, JNES, Nest 10. What is?
That's a lot harder.
That's a lot harder. What has prevented people from going after these homebrew emulations?
The thing about emulation on a system versus emulation of a system is that emulation on a system generally doesn't do anything. It's simply just a secondary OS that you're flashing into the memory, and then when you reset the power on, it goes back to this traditional OS. You're not storing anything on the actual physical device. You've got it on a memory card, and that memory card is what is used to store all of the flash information. However, emulation of a system is a completely different story. The reason why a lot of these sites and a lot of these emulators exist in the first place is because they don't traditionally provide the BIOS, a small line of code that's used to differentiate the system from being just a DVD player to an actual gaming system that reads the gaming code on the drive or the ISO or the ROM or whatever it is that you're actually using. So when you have something like this and it's not when it's not readily available through the site that's actually providing a copy of the emulator, all you're really doing is generating a production tool. You're presenting a tool that can be used to debug, not to actually pirate or steal anything. You're simply creating a tool and nothing as far as I'll segue this into basically saying something like, for instance,
PCSX,
which is what Sony is actually affirmed to be using for the actual emulation in the PlayStation Classic. It's not homebrew, it's not pre-built, it's not in-house. It's a project that started as an offshoot of a secondary project from the year 2000. And something like this is kind of crazy because you have a company on one end of the spectrum like Nintendo, and you have another company on the other end of the spectrum like Sony. Nintendo is like, close the doors. Sony's like, open the doors. Stop having it be closed.
Let me stop you right there, because about 18 years ago, it was Sony who was closing the doors. Remember Bleem? Sony was all up in their grill trying to shut them down. An emulator...
Yeah, but that was because you were emulating hardware on another piece of hardware, which is not something that is traditionally done. Bleem was originally created as a physical emulator for PlayStation so that people didn't have to spend as much money on a PlayStation as they did on the Dreamcast. That is a completely different issue, because now we're no longer in the software territory. We're no longer looking at storing data. You are now looking at moving from one console's hardware to another console's hardware.
Oh, that's Bleemcast. I'm talking about Bleem on the PC.
Bleem in general, because you were taking it. The reason why Bleem got reamed was because of Bleemcast, not because of Bleem in general. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's because of the fact that Bleemcast existed in the first place was the primary reason that Sony even knew that it was a thing. Most companies They don't care about you emulating the hardware. They want you to emulate the hardware because they want people to develop for it. Why do you think the Kinect had such a promising ideal, and why Microsoft was like, yeah, here's the fucking SDK, do whatever you want with it? Because they knew that the Kinect was a piece of shit accessory, and guess what? They still let people do whatever they wanted. There were people deriving hologram technology, functioning, good quality hologram technology with the Kinect. And that was on the 360 versions of the hardware. The only reason why this kind of stuff doesn't continue is because it's purely based on the fact that most of these companies don't want you emulating hardware on hardware, and that's what they're afraid of. And the reason why these classic consoles keep coming out, especially with something like the PlayStation Classic, they've affirmed that they're using an emulator. They're not using in-house. They're not creating an actual chip or putting all of this onto a flash drive. They've taken all of this and they've run it through a piece of software on a hard drive inside the device specifically to emulate the original PlayStation. Like, this is the stuff that we do on a, most people can do on a nightly basis on their own computers that run probably a hell of a lot more powerfully than what's going to be the hardware in the PS Classic. And yet this is what they've decided they're going to use. So it speaks to the idea of that while people don't like that's really the core of this. They don't care that the hardware is being emulated. They care about the bottom line, that their software isn't making them any more money because people are able to download it on the internet because high-speed internet is a thing that exists in this world. And had it not been for something like that, or having something like that that wasn't an issue 5, 7, 10 years ago, is a massive problem now because everyone has the ability and has access and the knowledge to want to go back to play these games. I think a lot of these bean counters decided, hey, guess what? There's an entire brand new generation of kids that are coming, and we want more money from them and their parent. Because their parents grew up on these consoles. We want these kids to grow up on the same consoles that their parents grew up on. So that's why we have an NES Classic, an SCS NES Classic, a Neo Geo Classic, a PlayStation Classic. That's why we're getting the Amico. That's why we're getting whatever.
The PC console classic.
Good lord!
Did you see that?
DOS box.
Little DOS box.
Everyone wants a DOS box that has a giant breaker switch to turn on the stupid thing to emulate the 8088. Of course. Why wouldn't we?
I do actually want to step here and note that Bleem won their lawsuits against Sony.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we're also kind of at a point where emulating stuff from a architecture perspective isn't really that illegal. Like, Sony does a lot of cease and desist stuff with the BIOS because they own it, but I have to imagine that on some level, if people pushed against that, it would probably end up in a similar position to the Bleem situation. Just nobody has enough money to fight that. That's why Bleem went out of business, because they didn't have enough money to fight it.
They used it to hold up on the lawsuits.
Yep.
So speaking of the PlayStation Classic now, we're going to get a little bit further into that, outside of the legality of things. So it looks like Sony has gone cheap on us. They're using, instead of going with a homebrew or they're a homegrown emulator for the PlayStation Classic, this is going off of something that I read an article at Kotaku, a guy who flew over to Japan to play with the PlayStation Classic for about 3 or 4 hours. In his little report, he talked about how, yeah, the games are underwhelming. I mean, we finally got the reveal about a few weeks ago about the 20 games, and let's be honest, it's very lackluster. We could shit on
paying $100 for 4 games that actually matter, and everything else is like, why?
I mean, we could literally sit here and shit on this list of games for like the next 20 minutes, but you know what? We got better things to talk about.
I don't. Who the fuck thought that the worst Persona game needed to be in this goddamn
So I'm gonna play devil's.
Fire that guy. Fire that fucking guy.
No, Mark. I'm going to play devil's advocate. Isn't technically it a good sign that if the first game in your series franchise is the worst game, that's a good thing?
I mean, sure.
I don't want to
But-
play Persona 1 again. I'm just saying, isn't it a
Sure.
good sign that knowing that they decided to go with that instead of, say, I don't know, Persona 2, it probably would have been a better buy? Who
I
the fuck
mean-
wants to play Jumping Flash again? I don't want to play a shitty 3D platformer. Why was Battle Arena Toshinden a good even thought?
Did I even say it would make it too?
Like, the fact of the matter is, okay, Battle Arena Toshinden is a bad game and should not have been on this system. I don't care what demographic you think the Amico is actually going to be for. It's still a bad idea, and no amount of star power behind it is going to function. Shilling anyone?
I would have rather had Bloody Roar.
Thank you! Absolutely! I would have shit my meal if they actually decided to put Bloody Roar on this system.
And I'm not
There
even
are
a furry.
so many people. I'm not a furry either, but that game was
Bullshit!
good. It had good fighting mechanics. It wasn't a terrible fighting game.
I think Mark just called you out on being a furry.
I don't have a persona. I don't know what you're talking about. I am not a furry. Fight me.
But the crappy list of games though can easily be summed up with a simple explanation, and that's based on the fact that they're using the PCSX open source code. And let's be honest, PlayStation games are not some of the easiest to emulate. I've played around about 15 years ago with at least 5 different emulators before settling on ePCSXE. God, try saying that 5 times fast. Hey, I got a follow. Thank you. So obviously, I just got Suikoden 1 and 2 just about a month ago, and I tried playing them on my PC, and dear Lord, I couldn't get like the game to run at a right speed. It was either running too fast or it was running too slow. I couldn't find a medium. That's how crazy it is with the emulation of a PlayStation game. So now imagine having to cycle through as many of these popular games as you can to find ones that'll probably play properly on this classic hardware. And thus we get half of these games.
It's a fucking cash grab. It's a cash grab.
It
It's
is.
absolutely what they're doing. They have put together a Raspberry Pi running as close to an up-to-date version as you can get of PCSX, the rearmed version, running 20 games that they were able to get working on it that were okay with their license holders. It is the worst. It is the worst thing. And it very much shows the difference between Nintendo and Sony as corporate holders of their properties. Nintendo built all of their shit kind of sort of from the ground up. I mean, their thing is like a Raspberry Pi 2, as I understand it. But they at least designed it with their own in-house stuff in mind. They're suing people who put up their games that they own. They are producing a thing that people care about and that matters. And Sony is taking the cheapest possible ways out in getting their shit to work the way that they want it to work, so that it's the least expensive that it can be. And it will probably sell, but
Yeah, of course.
it's very much a case where whether it sells or not isn't really the issue. It's Sony doesn't care. And it's fine not to care, I guess, because if people are going to pay money for this stuff either way, why do you have to? But it just shows a distinct lack of giving a shit as far as the company is concerned, and it's really just deeply frustrating, to be honest, that we're in this position where Sony is in charge at this point. Sony is the #1 company right now, and they couldn't give a fuck less.
They're going back to Sony of the PS2 era, full of arrogance. And who gives a fuck?
Basically. I don't know if it's really that, but there's so much more that they could have done with it that I feel got completely overlooked.
Now, on top of, the fact that, Sony cheaped out with, emulation and the list of games, it seems they also just decided to go cheap in regards to the operating system of the system itself. They have all 20 games just lined up in kind of like a rotary, like little list. You scroll through them. You have a specific memory card to save the data for each game, and you can access the manual. I mean, granted,
isn't that kind of what the Nintendo Classic does.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, there seems to be more of an aesthetic built into the dashboard of the NES and SNES Classic that, brings up that good nostalgia feeling. Where you're looking at the dashboard of the PlayStation Classic, it's just bland and boring looking. Whereas,
it looks like those old 1999 game things that you got from like Toys R Us and Walmart like 5 or 6 years ago that you just plug into the RGB ports on the front of an old television with a VCR on it.
mm-hmm.
Like, that's what it feels like to me. It feels like they just didn't... Like, this was all... The entirety of the PlayStation Classic, to me, feels like it's an afterthought. Like, there really isn't any real reason or rhyme behind what it is that they decided was going to be good versus what they decided to actually put into it. And it's like there were so many other things that they could have chose to do. There's so many things that they could have done that it just feels like everything about it was just so rushed and so pointless. And it's like, why?
Well, let's be truthfully honest. At the end of the day, we realize that Sony's a cheap bastard. Nintendo got paid. Let's move on to the next topic. I don't think there's really much more to discuss in this era because it's just disappointment all around. A lot of just head shaking. So, Jan, would you like to go ahead and introduce the next segment, please?
So,
speaking of head shaking.
Speaking of head shake, that's a good segue. Speaking of head shaking, so BlizzCon happened, and I'm sure a lot of people know kind of what actually occurred at BlizzCon. There were some good announcements. There was some character reveals. We've got a new character for Overwatch and Ashe. We've got a brand new original character for Heroes of the Storm who just came out today, Orphea. We've got updates for existing games. The absolute blown away, I'm blown away by the fact that they're even doing Warcraft 3 Reforged. I'm so happy that they're doing it. It looks amazing. Brand new models. They're going to be re-recording all the sound for it. It's remastered and upscaled to 4K. It looks great. I'm excited for it. I'm willing to throw down the $30 or so that I need to get the game again, just so that I can play through it. I mean, I already own it and all the expansions, traditionally, but to have a remastered version with slightly better UI and some better updates that we knew we would never get to the core version of the game, I'm willing to spend that for a complete remake of the game that actually plays on the par of like playing StarCraft 2. I don't have a problem with that. Where I have a problem, and where a large portion of the internet seems to have a problem, as is completely evident by the trending hashtag for the entirety of the weekend of BlizzCon, is hashtag No King Rules Forever. And it's a play on the fact that Blizzard has shielded its fan base and created a mobile phone only Diablo Immortal. A lot of people were not a fan of this. As soon as the video actually showing what the game was all about on YouTube appeared, man, it got destroyed. Fans and people alike were just absolutely lambasting this video to a point where Blizzard had to reset the like and dislike buttons on the video, and were consistently, and I mean consistently, deleting comments off of this video because of the sheer amount of hatred and vitriol that these people were spewing about this mobile-only Diablo.
And just to point out real quick, it is now the third most disliked video on the on YouTube right now.
Han, it's still November. We still got a month and a half. It'll happen. The game itself got such a poor showing that okay, so the three things that I think really kind of spelled doom for this from the get-go was they sent out a fairly fresh and fairly young lead designer to hype this game. Okay? He had no stage presence. He had no clue how anyone was going to take this game, and he genuinely thought that this game was going to be like critically successful. Like he figured he was going to walk out just like everyone else had before him, pitch this game, show everyone the video, show everyone the gameplay, and go, here you go, Diablo on your phones. It's going to be great. Except for the fact that the US audience doesn't play games like that on their phone. They play on their computer and their console. Somebody in the crowd mentioned, hey, there's a Switch version, you know. We already have a mobile version of Diablo on the Switch. And all he could say was, yep, there's a Switch version. Okay, so this is a thing that we made, and everyone's just like, it's crickets. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear other stuff from around the convention going on at the Mythic stage the entire time he was talking about the original release announcement for Diablo, for Immortals. That's how bad it got. It got to the point where people were trolling them with questions. There was a guy who is officially known as the Epic Red Shirt Diablo guy now, because that happens every BlizzCon, asking them if this was an out-of-season April Fool's joke.
Yep, I saw that one.
Yep,
There was another guy that came up and asked, is there any hope of a PC release for Immortal? And they say, absolutely not. This is a mobile-only platforming game. This is something that we only are going to be releasing on Android and iOS. We have no plans whatsoever to release this version of Diablo on PC. So we're thinking to ourselves, okay, this is fine. We can handle this. Where's Diablo 4? Where's Diablo 2 remastered? Where's Diablo remastered? Where's literally
there better be a Diablo
else?
remaster because I can't play online with that game anymore. Fuck you, Blizzard.
We haven't been able to for years, but that's the thing.
Actually, I was able to play it last year. I go on every once in a while. It's just this year after the recent update to BattleNet that I couldn't get on. I can't go beyond the chat room.
I don't know. But anyway, I haven't touched 2 in forever. But the long story short is Blizzard recently announced that they have a team of lead developers who have been removed from existing projects from Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft, all to work on, you guessed it, mobile phone games, specifically for mobile gaming. I don't have a problem personally with the idea that mobile gaming is an upcoming future, okay? It's not a gimmick like 3D. It's not something that's kind of... the price point isn't that expensive for most people, like, say, VR is. But putting games like that, and not even an originally created game, I might add, it is a well-known fact that Diablo Immortals is actually just a reskin of a NetEase game, and NetEase is a Chinese producer who, oh wait, that's right, is helping to co-produce Diablo Immortal for Blizzard. It's about the fact that the game itself created such an outrage because of the fact that we were only given Diablo Immortal. And then we're told vehemently, this is all we've got. This is all there is. We don't have a Diablo 4 announcement. We have no remastering announcements. We have no plans right now to make these known to anybody in the public. But then you've got insiders who are completely on a 180 trip, basically saying, actually, we had a Diablo 4 announcement. We even had a video for Diablo 4, and it got pulled. And Blizzard's like, no. That never happened. We didn't have any Diablo 4 announcements. We never had a video. Nothing got pulled. Diablo Immortal was the only thing we were going to announce at BlizzCon. Why would you announce something like that at BlizzCon? That's not a PC game. That's not a Blizzard game. That is a mobile game that is being co-produced by Blizzard for a mobile platform that, let's be honest, it's not Hearthstone. It's not. It's not a game that was purely built with mobile in mind. This game wasn't even built from the ground up. And I think a lot of people have a lot of problems and have a lot to say about the fact that this is something that happened. Because this is what we were told we were getting. We were told we were getting a Diablo announcement. We were also told that we were going to be getting a new IP. We didn't get either of those. We got a Diablo 3 experience on a mobile device, which, I might add, added the DLC pay-for-it Necromancer, but no Witch Doctor, which is in the core game of Diablo 3. So, oops. I mean, look, I would have taken a Druid pack for Diablo 3 over Immortal. I think a lot of people would have taken that. I think a lot of people would have taken a large number of anything. They would have even taken no Diablo news as okay over Diablo Immortal. And I think that the big issue here isn't so much that this was done how it was done. It was presented by people who shouldn't have been presenting it, and it was produced in such a way that everyone found out right away that this is a sham. This isn't even a Diablo game. It's a reskin of God of something or other that NetEase released 2.5 years ago in China on mobile. And I think the worst part about it is that Blizzard has this conceptual idea that they think they know for gamers, when in reality they just aren't listening anymore. And this seems to be a big problem with a lot of people, is that Warcraft is at its lowest point since launch. And the only reason they're going to see any amount of numbers come back as far as subs is concerned is not because of Battle for Azeroth, but because of WoW Classic.
The vanilla servers.
Right. And the only other game that's actually doing, and I'm not even kidding when I say this, the only game for them that's actually making any headway at all monetarily is Overwatch. And the only reason that game is still as good and as popular as it is currently is because of Jeff Kaplan.
Maybe I'm at the wrong end of the spectrum here, but I don't exactly have a problem with the existence of Diablo Immortal. I do, however, have a problem with how it was presented. I do have a problem with the fact that, we do know that they were going to present Diablo 4, but because of the reception, they pulled it, and then they started, backtracking on everything they were going to say about it. I was not a fan of, pretty much from a PR standpoint, Blizzard dropped the ball in the biggest way possible. I am actually for the idea of, Diablo being on the mobile phone. Why not? There's tons of hack and slash games on there. Why don't we get a polished one? Even if it is a reskin, it's still going to be polished up to a point where it's at least Blizzard standards. So you're going to have an enjoyable experience. That's if you're interested in it. And as a lot of people are pointing out, people are saying that the fans are angry. Yeah, they have a right to be angry. But they're angry because, we wanted to stay on PC. But if you're a fan of Diablo, wouldn't you play a new experience on your phone? I mean, people are playing it on the Xbox 360. People are playing it on the Xbox One. People are playing it on the Switch. I mean, people were playing it on the PlayStation when they ported the first Diablo game. I mean, just opening up to a new experience and playing Diablo Immortal on a cell phone might not be so bad.
That's where the problem comes from. So, the average cell phone screen is not enough real estate for you to be able to host the amount of information for these kinds of ARPGs that you need, you would need to play it on a larger device, such as like a tablet, something like this, which is a standard screen size. Okay, this is a Moto Play Z. Okay, so my screen goes from here to here. Okay, that's how big my screen is. So if I want to play Diablo Immortal, I only have this much room, okay, for me to be able to see literally all of the information that I need. Character, buttons, movement. I'm already covering a very large portion of my screen with my finger to move my character. Then I have to worry about pressing my buttons over here. So now I'm playing this game like this, okay? Not only is this uncomfortable and very difficult for me to keep up with, okay, but there just isn't enough space on my screen for the real estate, for the amount of information that's supposed to be going on. Not to mention the fact that I'm supposed to be able to play with a total of 6 people per room. That means there's more character on my screen than actual gameplay.
Oh, you were going to say something, Mark?
Well, regarding the aesthetic of how Diablo is going to work, I think they can probably do it fine. They can simplify out a lot of the stuff that would be in Diablo and replace it with stuff that's more mobile friendly. And I think that they can produce and provide a simplified Diablo experience, which is not what the Diablo fan wants necessarily. Like they aren't going to want something that is simplified. They're going to want something that is the Diablo they've come to know and love. But there's definitely a place for a simplified Diablo in the mobile perspective. You know, there's like early reviews are coming out for, you know, the new Pokemon games that came out. The Hey Let's Go games, and they are specifically designed to appeal to the Pokemon Go crowd and not the EV and IV trainers. And it's okay, like that's fine. You know, we can have multiple different crowds of people liking multiple different kinds of things. We can have the fan bases, you know, turn over if they need to. That isn't a big deal. The thing of it is, the company that Blizzard used to be is not the company that Blizzard is anymore. And the company that Blizzard is now isn't really invested in what the fan base wants because they don't 100% know how to get the thing that they want. Blizzard, back in the day, was a company that could basically do no wrong. They brought real-time strategy into as close to mainstream prominence as you were going to get on the PC. And I mean, people had been doing real-time strategy for a period of time at that point. You know, Dune 2 had existed before all of that. But yeah, and like they were the ones that made it cool on the PC. You know, Warcraft made it cool. Warcraft 2 made it cool. StarCraft made it cool. And then they were the ones that made the MMO a thing, like that they basically just took over the landscape of the MMO. They wrested it from EverQuest and became the overlords of that genre for almost a decade. Like that's not an easy thing to do, and they did it. The problem is that Blizzard as a company ended up becoming the founders of a large portion of what esports is today, completely accidentally. They had no intentions of making this happen. They create StarCraft, and StarCraft lays the foundation for a large part of what will eventually become the growing esports scene in South Korea. They create Warcraft 3, which begets Dota, which begets League of Legends. They're not involved in any of this at all. They created the framework that other people built on to make these games, and they went in on that. But the problem is, the company that Blizzard was back then was a small, agile corporation that could pivot and adapt with the times. They're not that anymore. They're a major corporate entity, part of the Activision family. They're huge. And the problem is that small companies can afford to be agile. Small companies can afford to do little things that they know will appease their fan base. Large companies have massive human resources departments to go through, and massive legal teams to go through, and massive amounts of planning they have to go through, and shitloads of budget meetings they have to go through, and everything else. And I'll give you a prime example of where the failing is. Around the same period of time, like within the same week, what did Riot release?
Mm.
The KDA
KDA?
music video.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because it was Worlds. Worlds happened. The World Finals for the League of Legends Championship happened the same weekend as BlizzCon.
Yep. And that thing took off, not just in South Korea, but worldwide.
Oh yeah.
Like, I don't like League of Legends. Riot is an awful fucking company, but I want to spend money on that game. I love KDA as a thing. I think it's great. And there are a lot of people who are in that same point of view that are like, wow, I would never play League of Legends because I love myself. And Riot
Now
is
I want to.
Yeah, now it's one of the worst companies, but fuck, I want to spend money on the company that came up with this. This is awesome. Because they're a small company. They can do shit like this. They're a small company invested in one game. Blizzard can't really do that. They are desperately trying to make esports their thing. And failing fucking miserably at it. And that's their major focal point right now.
With the only game that they had at the time, StarCraft, was their premier esports game. Okay, not just South Korea in general. In general, it was the only esports game that they had. They did very well for themselves with that because esports was kind of an arena where anybody could play a game that was based on that real-time strategy genre. When they decided to start adding in other games like WoW Arena, Warcraft 3, StarCraft 2 became a thing. That pulled all of the StarCraft players over to StarCraft 2. They started playing that. Now they've got all of these other games that are all esports centric. They've got Overwatch, they've got Heroes, they've got Hearthstone, they've got WoW, they've got StarCraft. It's kind of ludicrous that they've got all of these games that they're trying to focus all of their attention on for actually getting stuff out there. And it's it's the classic spreading yourself too thin issue. Riot has one game. Valve has one game. And they pull in, I mean, come on. What do you win if you win at BlizzCon? Couple $100,000? What do you win if you win League? Over $1 million. It's ludicrous, the difference. Purely because there's just so much going on there. And like you said, the agility has been long gone, and I think that's where they realize, hey, we've got to hit every single market we know that's hot, or we're going to be useless. No one's going to know who we are anymore. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not true at all.
They could easily shelve a couple of these projects and focus on the ones that are winners. HOTS is never going to go anywhere. Nobody's ever going to give a fuck about HOTS. You could shelve that tomorrow and it wouldn't make a difference. I know that they invested time and money in it. You've probably turned a profit off of the people who do play it. But anybody who's going to be playing that is somebody who is not good enough to qualify to be a champion in League and is not good enough to qualify to be a champion in Dota. They are third place in that realm. And if there's a profit to be made there, okay, but it doesn't need to be a priority for you. It absolutely does not. And the fact that you are going to get the people who weren't good enough to be the best or the second best is not going to make for compelling television is the best word I can come up with.
No one wants to see it.
No. And,
no one cares.
Competitive WoW is definitely a thing, and I'm sure that there are people who care about that, but that is decidedly a niche that is not going to be, a top 3 framework for your company. That, of all things, should probably just go away. Overwatch is fine. You know, if that's what you want to do, they're like outside of, you know,
Well, it's more
Team
competitive.
Fortress.
It's seeing more views and it's seeing more play than TF2, but it's, you know, it's still a TF2 idea, so that's a thing.
Yeah, like I mean, you're competing with every first-person shooter that exists in that space, to be sure. So it's, you know, you're not just competing with TF2, you're competing with, you know, anything related to first-person esports. So I don't know if like Black Ops is necessarily a thing there, but like,
I mean, Black Ops is Black Ops, COD is COD. COD will always have a place in the FPS genre, but it's not esports as you would see it as esports. The only time you're going to see an FPS that is still an esport is always and forever going to be CS:GO.
yeah.
Well,
and they're never
there's
going
Quake
to,
and Unreal that are trying to make a comeback at that.
Yeah, okay, go fuck yourself.
Excuse you? Fuck you. Those are the real games of skill right there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I used to compete
I mean,
in that back in the early 2000s, late 90s.
So-
Fuck off.
First it was Quake, then we moved to Unreal, then we got CS, then we moved to Halo, then we moved to COD, then we moved to CS again, and now we've got Overwatch. So it's like there's this entire idea of where the evolution of the FPS genre as an esport went, and that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, we'll save that for later.
Where Blizzard is seeing its issues right now is no longer an issue of what is and what isn't good. It's now a matter of this is what we think we need to do in order to stay relevant. And that's where the whole Diablo Immortal issue comes up. That's where the idea of them trying to be a esport company is going to continue to be a thing that they want to do. You know, if Blizzard decided next week, or not even next week, when is VGA? On the 6th? If Blizzard decided on the 6th at VGA to drop a Battle Royale video
I wouldn't be surprised.
as a new IP, like, people would be literally destroying them all over again. It's like, why? What's the point? It's because they want to stay relevant. They don't care if there's a game that they know can continue to do good in StarCraft and Overwatch, because let's be honest, those are their two top selling games, versus worrying about trying to stay relevant by making an entire team of devs that are working on mobile phone games and releasing some sort of ridiculous trailer for some battle royale game that they needlessly decided was a thing that they were going to do.
Why
Like,
not?
it doesn't make any sense. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's probably a good business decision, but it'll be them stretching themselves even thinner than they already are. And I don't know that they have I don't know that they have the stamina as a company to be able to stay afloat on something like that anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day, it kind of comes down to the case of Blizzard got over really well with what they came up with, and they have created some absolute masterworks gaming wise. But you're sort of in this position right now where the chef has come up with a couple of really great ideas for the restaurant, and instead of continuing to focus on those things, it's like, oh, let's experiment with some Italian. Oh, let's experiment with some, you know, Indian food. Let's get some, you know, halal in here. Let's do this. And it's like, listen, I appreciate that you want to do all of this experimentation, but like you have to stick with what brought you to the dance too. Like those people who like your existing recipes are important. Vegetables is important.
Pig is important.
Ah. But speaking of, is there anything else left we need to say about Blizzard? You know, wow, my throat just really went to shit there.
Yeah, you did. I
I'm
think
probably going to try out Diablo Immortal and try to force myself to like it just out of spite at this point.
I think I'm
That
going to
doesn't
get it
sound-
regardless because, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a fan of the franchise, so I had no problem trying out something new. Hell, I'm playing a fucking Miku game on on my goddamn cell phone, which is a Chinese exclusive right now. So,
we collect ship waifus. What's your point?
hmm
fuck your boats.
I plan on
That's
it.
the point.
Okay, so speaking
So-
of from one company to the next, we have a company who's trying to buy their future. Mark, you want to introduce this new topic of conversation, please?
Sure. So it's no secret that Microsoft has been the dirt worst in this console generation. The Xbone did not go over well. It kind of went over like a lead fart when it was initially announced, and Microsoft was basically like, "Hey, I know we make a video game platform, but here's all this other stuff that we want you to do with it." And people were like, "No, hated it."
TV,
So
sports, TV, sports.
yeah, so
Rent
you
movies.
basically get in the situation where they launched it with the Kinect, nobody cared. They eventually had to patch out Kinect functionality, still nobody cared. They had a very small listing of exclusive titles that nobody cared about, and they're dead last. They are absolutely dead last. Nintendo is kicking their ass. Sony is kicking their ass. This is not news. So it is pretty clear that Microsoft is looking to desperately make a big turnaround as far as having some type of content to provide for the next console generation. Possibly for this console generation, but most likely for the next console generation. At E3 this year, they bought up a bunch of companies: Ninja Theory, Playground Games, Undead Labs, and Compulsion Games. Okay, that's an interesting group of acquisitions.
Sure.
But then this past week, they purchased two more companies that made a bunch of people sit up and take notice. Most notably, Obsidian and In Exile. Obsidian is, for those who don't follow developer brand names, the company behind arguably the best 3D Fallout, New Vegas.
I can
Pillars
argue
of
that.
Eternity. You can, but you'd be wrong.
I would
Yeah.
be right. I
You
can
would
just show you the
absolutely not.
numerous glitch videos out there.
Glitch
Yeah, that's
videos have
fine.
nothing to do with the actual sales numbers of knowing full well that New Vegas is the best-selling Fallout of all of the Fallouts up to and including 4. So
Best selling
Go on.
doesn't mean it's a great game. I'm just saying, I don't like most of the Call of Duty games, but there's some of the best selling games of all time.
They've also patched out the majority of the glitches, and it's not like other Bethesda games don't have glitches already in them. The writing in Fallout New Vegas is far superior to anything that has come out in Part 3 and Part 4, and while it launched in a terrible state, it's at a point now where it's functional. You're fucking wrong, comma space, take the L, period. Anyway,
No L to take. Suck it, sir.
I'm just saying, take the L. Take the L. You're
No.
wrong.
No.
It's fine to be wrong, but
No.
you're wrong.
No.
They also made Pillars of Eternity, which was generally well regarded, and Pillars of Eternity 2, which was slightly less so. Alpha Protocol, which was a broken piece of shit, but still vaguely interesting in its own way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They also made the first South Park game, for those of you keeping track. In Exile made Wasteland 2 and a couple of Bard's Tale games, which are generally regarded to be quite good. They also made Torment Taizumu Minero, which was never going to live up to the original, but is generally regarded to be fine-ish if you accept the fact that it's never going to live up to the original. And Hunted the Demon Forge, a game that I am probably the only person who likes it.
You're
So,
probably wrong.
I mean, that's definitely an interesting thing to do, especially if you want to succeed in the PC marketplace. I'm just not 100% certain where you're going to go from there, because I don't know how well that's going to help out with the Xbox One.
Not the Xbox One, but obviously it's like we said in a podcast earlier in the year. Microsoft has given up on this generation, and they're looking towards the future. They're already got their new console being in the works, and they're obviously, getting as many people as they possibly can, ready to have, first party, exclusive titles available for their new system. And that's really what they're going out and doing here. They're getting acquisitions of companies who are well known for making games like Ninja Theory did some pretty good games. I mean, Hellblade is fun. Heavenly Sword was fun. Give them a different take on who knows what kind of IP they might get in terms of like an action IP. You got In Exile, who does some pretty good. In Exile and Obsidian, who do some pretty good RPGs, CRPGs in that. So you can definitely, you're going to cater to that niche right there. So they're obviously looking at companies that they can acquire and specifically target like each type of like gamer they can probably get to come onto their boat for their new system when it comes out in the future. And that's perfectly fine. I think it's a reasonable strategy, and I look forward to seeing what comes from it.
I think my biggest issue isn't so much the fact that they're buying up companies, it's the fact that they haven't really gotten to a point where they've understood that what they're doing and where they're headed is most likely not going to be in a console market that is current. I don't know that a lot of people really understand or are really looking at something that I think a lot of people should be looking at, and that's the Xbox Games Pass. I think that the idea behind what they're doing with the Game Pass is a prototype. And I don't know a lot of people that understand that. I think what they're doing with this is they're going to be looking at what's going to happen with the Games Pass to see sort of where the future for them is actually heading. If the Games Pass does good, 99% chance that their new console is most likely going to be a streaming platform. I don't see it having hard drive. I don't see it having a disk reader. I see this being a system that is purely going to be all download, all stream, all on-demand content. And I think they're doing this to buy out the teams that have hits with partial success, like New Vegas, Pillars, things like that. Things that are still considered independent enough for them to not be a major studio, but still have them be powerhouse enough for them to be able to make funds for them to continue on with whatever else they're going to decide to do next. And I think that's where the big issue comes from, because not a lot of people are looking at where the console market in general is and where it's headed. I think that there are ideas, and I think that on paper, having a lot of these companies in their back pocket already, on top of the existing developers who are all first party for them now as well, makes it really unique and gives them a really interesting sort of way to collaborate with not just the game companies they have, but with other third-party developers in the future for other games that could also potentially become killer apps. Are we going to get another console generation where the primary games for Xbox are really what provide the system as a dominant force in the console market? I don't know. I think that them continuing to make Halo is both admirable and stupid, but it is what it is. You're going to always associate a Microsoft console with a Halo game because they're never going to stop milking that cow, even though it died 5 years ago. Because let's be honest, Reach was the best last Halo they ever made, and ODST can suck my ass. But the entire idea behind what they decided was a good idea versus where they're headed, I mean, I don't know. I think that having these studios is going to be a boon for Microsoft in the long run. They have potentially some of the best companies they could have actually gotten into their pocket now for both hardware and software. So at this point, it's about product. What are they actually going to produce? What are they actually going to release that's going to let us know that Microsoft actually is going to be trying to stay afloat? Because right now, with the Xbox One, they didn't do that. I can tell you right now, I only got an Xbox One for 2 games. One of which is a console exclusive, and the other one eventually was released through the Windows 10 Marketplace and eventually Steam, to a point where I don't care about that console anymore. Literally every other game that I want or could want and can play on an Xbox One, I can play on either a PS4 or a PC, of which I own both, because that's the platform that has the player base. And that's really where the issue comes down to, is that the player base decides who ends up winning. I'm not a person who decides I'm going to buy a console specifically to buy a console. I'm going to buy a console specifically to play games. That is why I am a gamer. That is why I play games. I do not need to pick and choose which console I want based on which console is best. That's long gone. That died at the end of the PS3 era, because everything is so unexclusive at this point. There's no reason to need to buy these systems if literally every system is going to have it, and we already know where the player base is going to be.
Here, let me go and put my Spider-Man in my Xbox One. Oh, wait.
Oh, wait. It really just boils down to the fact that I think Microsoft is trying to... A lot of people say they're in their death throes, and I don't think that. I think that they have... This is a good time for them to reevaluate. This is a good time for them to step back and go, okay, we get it. We're moving on. Here's all of these new companies that we're buying. Here's all of this new content that we're going to be able to provide in the future. We want you to look forward to that. If what they say is true, and they really do care about the gamers, then that's great. I can't wait to see what you guys produce. Because I'll be damned to think that they're ever going to not be in the console market and not making games or not producing in some fashion. That would be ridiculous. They've built such a library of studios and hardware manufacturers that to not have something built and to not have something for whatever the next generation, I would be blown away if they said that we're no longer making hardware, we're going software like Sega. I would be blown away.
In fact, that's actually kind of a perfect analogy, because a lot of people I've read have been comparing Microsoft's current path to that of Sega's. Pretty much, coming into the market with their first console, the equivalent to the Sega Master System, the SG-1000, whatever. Finally challenging Nintendo or Sony at this point with the Xbox 360, the Sega Genesis, and, actually showing that they're a contender, that they are here to play ball. They dropped the ball big time with the Xbox One, like they did with the Saturn. I guess you can also call the Kinect the 32X at that point. And you could hopefully pray to God that their next console doesn't go out like Dreamcast does, something that has so much promise and good stuff going for it, and in the end just gets taken out by Sony.
Yeah.
I'm still really confused as to why they bought Compulsion Games. Like, here's my thing, okay? Playground Games and Undead Labs, purchasing both of those companies makes complete logistical sense. Playground Games, essentially, all they've ever made is Forza Horizon. Just fucking bring them in-house and be done with it. Fine.
Right, exactly.
Undead Labs has only made State of Decay, which, okay, it's basically a Microsoft game at this point. Bring that shit in-house. Done. Fine. Ninja Theory, In Exile, and Obsidian makes sense if you're paying attention to the hype following these various different games. The various different companies, I should say. Ninja Theory has always been a company who makes gameplay engines in search of a game that people want to play.
I mean, it makes sense. It looks like to me, and it feels like to me, that there is this weird dichotomy between people who think that certain game companies or certain consoles are bad, and people that are just like, I think this has potential. And I think the people that are on the side of the potential are like people like you and me, where we can see these kind of things where you've got all of this idea and all of this clout, but if you can't produce, then what's the point?
Well, that's my thing, because they picked up Compulsion Games. Compulsion Games has made 2 games. Okay? Contrast, a platformer that nobody cared about and nobody liked. And We Happy Few. Yeah. Why would you pay money for that company? I want to buy a company that is making arguably one of the worst goddamn games, like, to come out in 2018.
Because they have to own an artsy company, obviously.
That would be like buying the motherfuckers who developed The Quiet Man.
You mean Square Enix?
I thought they had like some in-house group do that.
No, it was Square Enix.
Well, that makes sense. Lord knows that somebody at Square Enix was like, hey, remember the bouncer? Let's make that again.
Okay, so in defense of The Quiet Man.
Oh, God, here we go.
Oh no.
This game was released 9 months early. It was not scheduled to come out for another 9 months. For some ungodly reason, Square Enix decided it would be a really good idea to just release it now in its horribly unfinished state. And nobody has any idea why. It just happened to a release. Like, I've been watching the development of this game because I thought the idea of having something with full motion video for the cutscenes that was very high quality, I might add, and fully 3D CG fight sequences seemed like a decent idea. And I still say that it's a decent idea. I think my biggest issue with it is the fact that they released it 9.5 months early when they shouldn't have. And that the game itself had a lot of problems because of the fact that it came out in about a 75% complete state.
I'm gonna stop you right there.
Okay, I gotta listen.
So I streamed this game on Saturday.
Yeah, just 5 minutes if that was enough for me.
Which, you know, you would have known if you had been watching it and not streaming your own games. Not that I'm bitter, but here's the thing. That game plays like shit. It's mechanically awful. And the in-game graphics engine, the main character's forehead looks like a Sharpay's asshole.
Oh, I've seen
But the plot of that game is so nonsensically fucking asinine, you could have put Tekken 7 on that goddamn thing, and it still would have been shit. And the best part is, I watched Hamish play through half of the vocalized version of it. Oh my god. The plot is just the worst. It is just the worst. I could have written a better plot than the plot of The Quiet Man, high on Quaaludes with a crayon shoved up my ass. For reference purposes, I'm using the crayon to write the script. Like, it's not just there as like executive accoutrement.
Oh my god.
Like,
Wow.
just shove a pencil right in my butt, and I'll just just sit around and like squeak that out while I'm freaking tripping on coyote gods and shit.
Look,
that game is a masterclass in terrible. Like the graphics engine, the mechanics, sure, they're not good, absolutely. But if you would put like the best graphics engine and the best mechanics onto that game, you would bolted those to that plot. Oh, it still would have been a terrible piece of shit. We would have just been saying, hey, the 20 minutes of gameplay that exists in this game is pretty good. It's a shame that the 3.5 hours of plot is fucking garbage.
Marvel versus Capcom Infinite.
Yeah, but there's actually other stuff to do. 2 things. 1, there's other stuff to do with Marvel versus Capcom Infinite. 2, The Quiet Man is worse. It is objectively the worst plot I have seen in over a decade.
So let's just say we're happy that We Happy Few is on the Xbox, right?
Yeah,
That's
so,
what you're trying to say.
Yeah, so I don't understand why you would pay money for compulsion games. That being said, let's be clear. Out of every company, oh no, I smashed. JT said JT said there are too many good games out there to bother dealing with bad games these days. No, my friend. I am a connoisseur of terrible games. I own a physical copy of Ride to Hell Retribution that I need to play.
There's a physical copy?
Yes, a physical copy.
Oh my god.
I own a physical copy of Leisure Suit Larry box office bust autographed by Al Lowe, who smashed it with a hammer. I love me some bad games. When everybody told me, like Hamish Black was telling me, oh, this game is fucking terrible, it's the worst. I was like, I gotta own this. I gotta fucking buy this. He's like, don't do it. And I was
That's
like,
why
no.
I'm waiting for you to tell me
don't
about
understand.
the new Leisure Suit Larry game that just came out a few days ago.
I have to see how much that is. Because if it's bad, okay, it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be good. If it's mediocre, I'm just gonna be sad.
Let me find the price for you real quick.
Yeah, you do that. But in the meantime, like, Compulsion Games is the company that got out of this with the best possible
It's $30.
shot of... Fuck off. If you go on a Steam sale for 20, I'll consider it. But is it on Steam?
Yes.
What's the Steam response to it?
Oh, jeez, let me go look. I think it was
That's
mixed.
That just
I look at it
makes me
this way,
mediocre.
like
that makes me sad.
if it really comes down to if we're really coming down to
57 reviews, all positive.
all right, well,
I
how
guess.
many are troll?
Oh wait, I found one that went negative. Not smart, funny, or clever. A poor attempt at reviving an old classic.
I'll probably get it on sale then. But yeah, so Compulsion Games is the company that far and away does the best with this. Because let's be clear, they were going to go out of business if Microsoft had not bought them. Contrast did nothing for nobody. And it was one of the PSN games that was free when the PlayStation 4 launched. So, they didn't exactly make a shitload of money off of that. And We Happy Few, I don't think anybody is happy with that game. And I wanted it. So, at least the name is appropriate.
You're not wrong.
But, I gave that game every opportunity and it was shit. Like that, they would not have been able to get another Kickstarter off the ground. They would not have been able to get anything else going. With Microsoft on board with them, at the very least, they're probably going to be okay. I am very curious as to how Ninja Theory, Obsidian, and In Exile are going to do. Like, maybe this is just me, but this is how I perceive this. Ninja Theory, as I was saying, has always been a company that's had a gameplay concept in search of an idea to bolt it onto. They've had games that play masterfully that are just utterly mediocre in all other respects. They, their take on Devil May Cry, pretty good, but the game was never going to be a success. Nobody was ever going to like it because of all of the heat that had been generated around it. The games that they made before that, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, great gameplay. As plot goes, don't really care. Like, the only game they've made that was legitimately bad mechanically was Kung Fu Chaos, and it's the first game they ever made. So, but Hellblade really showed that given the opportunity to make their own game, they could make something masterful and interesting. And if anything can be said about being purchased by Microsoft, it is this. Microsoft, more than any other company, is desperately a company in search of a hit. So they will give you way more rope than you would ever possibly need to either, pull yourself to the top or hang yourself with. I mean, look at that Fable Legends game that they had. That game was in development hell. Was in open beta for over a year before Microsoft was finally like, nope, shut it down. Can't do it. It's not going anywhere. And they would have probably let that company continue going if they had something reasonable to do with it. Rare still exists.
Why? I have no idea. Probably just for the properties.
They fucking still exist. And like Microsoft is just like, yeah, that's fine. You guys can keep existing, do whatever. Maybe you'll make another Viva Pinata game or something. Just that's fine. You go do what you're gonna do. This is definitely of benefit for a company like Ninja Theory, where they can just make a game that they want to make and probably have it actually do okay. In Exile,
They're just more of a niche company, to be honest.
Wasteland 3 is definitely going to be a big thing for Microsoft for sure. I think that's going to be a big deal one way or the other. But In Exile has not really showed a lot of great promise as a company outside of the Wasteland franchise. They did about as good as they were going to, I think, with with their
it was backed by
game.
Kickstarter, so
Oh, it must be good.
Yeah, so like they did about as good as they were gonna with their Torment game. It wasn't great, but you were never gonna make a good sequel to Torment. You know what I'm saying? Like that was never going to happen. It was, that was a game that had been originally created like over the course of like a decade in various capacities. You weren't just gonna Kickstarter up a sequel and have it be this amazing thing. It just wasn't gonna happen. The Bard's Tale as a franchise is fine, and I'm sure that that'll do well for Microsoft, but it's anything outside of the Bard's Tale and Wasteland that In Exile has made has been questionable. I liked Hunt of the Demon's Forge, but I'm the only person who liked Hunt of the Demon's Forge, basically. So I feel like this acquisition is going to be great for the PC perspective of things, but I don't see it going anywhere outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
The acquisition of Obsidian is the one that's probably going to be the most flip-floppy, I think, because Obsidian is definitely a crew full of great writers who can make a good game if they are given the appropriate amount of time to do so, but are rarely given the appropriate amount of time to do so. KOTOR 2 is widely considered to be the better of the two games, but you have to do the work of making it a playable game on your own because it launched in shit shape.
Mm-hmm.
Fallout New Vegas is widely considered to be the best written of the modern Fallouts, but it had to go through a shitload of patching, more than a lot of your other Bethesda-style games, to get it to a point where it was playable. South Park: The Stick of Truth was as good as you were going to make a South Park game be.
probably the best South Park game in existence, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even with like the Fractured Whole existing, it's still a better game than that.
Mm-hmm.
So Obsidian definitely has a reputation of being best in show from the writing perspective. Even Alpha Protocol, for as bad of an experience mechanically as it is still interesting. The problem is that outside of Pillars of Eternity, I don't really know what Obsidian has right now to offer anybody, really. I don't know if they're going to make some type of a Microsoft property into an RPG. I don't know if they are going to try and do something altogether different. But I will be very interested to see, above and beyond anybody else, what their first game is post-acquisition.
I'm sure it's going to be some kind of like CRPG in the vein of like the Pillars, and I mean, obviously, with these companies that they've acquired, I think Microsoft has given up on the Japanese side of things, so I'm surprised they don't own any Japanese studios out of the 6 companies that they've bought. Because I mean, they obviously have been successful just in the American and the European market, never in Japan. I think they've definitely given up after the 360. But I think in a sense, you kind of have to have a variety, and while you do have a unique variety amongst the 6 companies that you have, you're not going to get a specific demographic, because at least 3 of the 6 are all niche companies. Like, they make games for a smaller group of people that really enjoy them. And if you can get, like, a bigger Japanese studio, like maybe Valhalla. I don't know what the hell they're doing right now. Valhalla Knights. And you can make your, like, over the top Japanese centric, action games. You might be able to get more variety or whatever, and probably get more people interested in the next Xbox console, in Japan maybe. But I mean, it's just okay. Maybe I'm just rambling on, but that's just my viewpoint right there.
I mean, I don't see Microsoft focusing on Japan because Japan has made it apparent that they have no interest in getting anything with Microsoft's name attached to it as far as console goes. And I kind of don't blame them for that. Focus on the markets that are willing to give you money,
Mm-hmm.
All I can say about this is Microsoft, hey, at least we're not EA.
To be fair, there's a lot of, hey, at least we're not, so they can be applied to that.
I mean, right, but
Hey, we're not Activision.
I think the biggest thing about it is that, and the reason why I said it that way was specifically just because Microsoft is buying these smaller companies that were basically going out of business and are now revitalizing them. Whereas EA did the exact opposite. They took companies who were doing relatively well based on specific franchises, brought them in, and then murdered them mercilessly.
Yeah.
So I think that by giving a couple of these companies access to these other groups, there's a decent collaboration here that could create something that we may not have seen coming that could very well be the next killer app on whatever new console they decide to release next generation.
Yeah, I mean, some of these companies are true indie from the ground up, and now that they have more resources, more money, hopefully more time to work on their games without the fear of closing up shop, we might get something tremendous from them.
I want to see a game that just happens to be co-created between Ninja Theory and Obsidian. I want to see what they can make. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I would definitely be interested in that.
I think they could be. This is awkward, but I think you put those two companies together, they could be the next BioWare.
Which is interesting because BioWare, the company as we understand it, is kind of sort of doesn't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
They're slowly fizzling out of existence.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be another Dragon's Age, but Anthem is basically a complete departure from anything that they have ever made before, and could very much be a make or break for that company.
Oh, it will
Anthem
be, absolutely.
Does well, Anthem does really well, we're going to see more Anthem from that company. If Anthem doesn't do well, we may see BioWare stop existing.
Exactly.
So you're kind of sort of in the case where there is a place for a company to step in and be a BioWare.
Oh, absolutely. So,
all right.
I don't know. I think that's pretty much it. I think it's more of a matter of, like, we know where this is headed. We know what they can do, and at this point, it's just a matter of wait and see. And I don't know that
I agree.
I think that the biggest issue of wait and see in this case is if this is going to be their swan song, if this is going to be their Dreamcast, okay, if we're going to go back to the Sega comparison, if this is going to be their last hurrah, they need to make sure that what they're producing is something that's going to be feasible in the market. And I think if we're going to tie all of this back to what we were talking about, I think by having these companies in the fold as first-party developers, there's a good chance that you could see a lot of, I don't want to use the word cross-contamination because that sort of breeds the wrong concept, but you're going to see a lot of crosstalk between a lot of these companies to make some of these games going forward. I mean, it's double helix all over again. And I think that you start small, you bring them in, they make a big thing, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, this is a killer app. I mean, say what you want about Killer Instinct as a game franchise. It sold consoles. It did. For almost 2 years, it sold consoles because that's the only way you could play it. and people wanted that. They wanted KI back. That nostalgia and that level of just absolute, just tender loving care that Double Helix gave to that game franchise sold consoles. And it really was a good idea. And to swap out Double Helix for Iron Galaxy, who arguably only released one good character and completely blindsided not only the KI community, but just the game in general into obscurity, really didn't make a lot of sense. But you win some, you lose some. And I think that having what they've got now with these new companies, and by getting Obsidian and putting them in the fold and bringing them into a situation where they have the potential, based on existing successes, to make something beautifully amazing that I don't think anyone would see coming, I think it's worth to see and see what is exactly Microsoft has in the books, because, only time will tell. But, is it too little too late, or is it going to be something that's actually going to be worth it?
In hindsight, so if their next console does end up being, Dreamcast, Microsoft does have their fallback, which is just developing games for their Windows platform. So I mean, they have a safety net in place pretty much, and we've been seeing it. They've been releasing games to play on Xbox and on Windows. So it's we know where they're going to go if their next platform fails. So, and they have companies that will develop for them exclusively, so they can deny these games on Steam. Something for the revamped Windows Store that Phil Spencer says he's working to fix. We'll see how that works out. So, any final thoughts on this, by the way, before we wrap it up?
Still absolutely baffled they bought fucking Compulsion.
Oh my god!
All right. Before we call it a night, what do we got going on this in the world of streaming videos? Speaking of which, Mark, when's that video coming out? Soon. Before the end of the year or after?
This year. It will be definitely coming out this year. Hopefully this month.
Okay. So anything you're streaming at all this weekend?
I've been going back to Saturday streams. Last Saturday we did The Quiet Man. Saturday before that we did board games, and I believe this Saturday we are going to be doing board games. I have to double check with the people I have invited to make sure that they will be able to attend, but we should be doing a board game stream this Saturday. Should be every Saturday going forward, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twitch.tv/MarkBWriting. I will probably do a vocal playthrough of The Quiet Man next Saturday, because, whoo boy, that is some shit.
All right, how about you, Jen?
So what you're telling me is that you're basically going to continue to play The Quiet Man until Metal Wolf Chaos comes out.
No.
That's horrible. Oh my god.
I'm also planning to devote some time to making fun of the Game Awards, because I just saw their category for Best Narrative, and I almost shat.
Oh, they finally released that one?
Uh-huh.
What did they announce for it?
Red Dead Redemption 2.
Okay.
Marvel's Spider-Man.
Okay.
Life is Strange 2, Episode 1.
Kill me.
God of War.
Boy.
Detroit.
Robot.
Insert Microsoft shutdown noise here. I got nothing for you.
Yeah. Fuck you, Geoff Keighley, you piece of shit.
Like I said, this show for the last several years
ass.
has been him stroking his ego.
Look, all I'm going to say is I saw the Game of the Year
His
category.
ego is weird and misshapen.
You're not wrong. All I can say is I saw the category, the nominees for Game of the Year, and I'm upset. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. What do you got going on?
I'm still doing my Monday, Wednesday, Friday stuff. I am. God, I'm not really working on anything specific right now. I've been sort of on and off with Monster Hunter World as per the norm. I'm bouncing back and forth between the two platforms because they're starting to release events pretty consistently between the two consoles now. PC just released the Call of Tiroth Siege, so I was going through that again to unlock Call of Tiroth gear and the Bushi tickets for the layered armor. They are finally, oh my lord, they're finally almost done with all of the updated Arc Tempereds. So the final Arc Tempered, which is coming out this weekend and is going for the next 2 weeks, is Arc Tempered Xenojiva. So that'll be entertaining. Outside of that, nothing really specific. I think I'm kind of back and forth between a couple of real specific games. Like I'm going back into some like older catalog stuff. I know that next week is going to be weird for a lot of people just because it's the Thanksgiving holiday week, but I do know that the week after, the 26th, and 28th, and 30th, the week after Thanksgiving, I'm doing a Thanksgiving leftovers week, where I'm going to be going through a very large catalog of my unplayed Steam games and going through and doing full playthroughs of a lot of those games. So that's going to be a lot of weird sideshow indie games that not a lot of people know about, and or games that were very popular back in 2016, because I'm both poor and slow when it comes to playing my games.
For me coming up, my 3 Vets and a Noob is still on hiatus, but we're going to... The members who are still around, we're going to be playing probably Fallout 76 until our boy Rico returns from college, because he does college.
My condolences.
Monday is now becoming a thing where I stream Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate with my buddy Reggie. I kind of got a nice little setup where I'm capturing his Switch and my Switch, and I'm streaming both at the same time, which is kind of a really unique point of view. We'll be doing that not every Monday though, because there's going to be days where he can't come over because of his job. So on those days, I'll probably continue to do what I'm doing now, which is going into my backlog of Xbox 360 games. I just opened out of my shrink wrap Halo 4, and I started playing that.
Oh God!
I started to.
Okay.
I'm playing Infinite Undiscovery again. I was about halfway through that game, and I decided, you know what? After 10 years, I think I should finish that damn game. So that's what I'm doing right now.
All right.
Yeah. We only have a couple more shows left in the year, as a matter of fact, for GVN Live. Our next episode is November 27th. And then after that is going to be a very special show. It'll be the last show of the year. But on December 11th, we are going to be celebrating the 25th anniversary of the game Doom. Like, holy fuck nuggets. 25 years have come from one of the biggest gaming franchises of all time. So, let's see how long he goes for.
But can you play it on your lamp?
Yeah, the game that can be played on anything.
Can I play
now.
Doom on my refrigerator?
Yes, you can.
I don't even have a smart refrigerator, so that's
If
it
you
right there.
did you know that? Okay, so you know how Apple released the laptops like a year and a half ago that have that weird touch bar sensor at the very top, just above the keyboard? Yeah, did you know you could play Doom on that?
Yeah, I saw that. I couldn't stop laughing.
It's
So-
programmable for even that. That's just how easy it is to play Doom on literally anything.
So yes, right there, our last episode of the year before our winter break. And then when we come back sometime in January, we're going to kick off the new year with, of course, the GVN Live Awards show. And we're going to have a little bit of planning to do over the winter vacation, so it'll be a lot of fun. But again, the last 2 shows of the year, November 27th, December 11th, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in, having fun time with us, trolling us. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank you, Mark, and I want to thank you, Jan, for joining us, or joining me tonight, as always.
Of course.
Of course.
All right, and from everyone here at GVN Live, have a good night.